Did you know there are places in the United States so terrifying, so abandoned, that even time seems too afraid to move there? A hospital where the stretchers still roll at night. A town swallowed by fire that still burns beneath the earth. And deep in the woods, a forgotten village where fresh footprints appear, footprints no living person could have left. But the question is, who is making them? If you want to uncover the chilling truth, and hear the full story that will keep you awake tonight, make sure you watch this video till the end. Don't forget to subscribe for more haunting stories like this, and drop your ideas in the comments about which abandoned place we should explore next. Midnight in America has a strange silence to it, a silence that settles heavy in places long forgotten. They say the walls remember everything, every laugh, every scream, every secret. Tonight, we step inside the shadows of 5 of the creepiest abandoned places in the United States, places that refuse to die, even after the people are gone. The first is the Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Kentucky. Once a hospital for tuberculosis patients, it now stands as a monument to suffering. Long, endless hallways stretch like veins in a corpse, lined with rusted bed frames and broken windows. Locals whisper about the death tunnel, where bodies of the dead were wheeled out under cover of night. Some claim they still hear gurneys rattling, rolling across the cracked tile floors, even though no one's been alive here for decades. Then there's Centralia, Pennsylvania, a whole town swallowed by fire. In 1962, a coal seam ignited beneath the ground, and it's been burning ever since. Roads buckle from the heat, smoke rises from cracks in the earth, and faded stop signs stand guard over empty streets. Most residents fled long ago, but a few stayed, living on top of a fire that could rage for centuries. The strangest part? Visitors say they hear church bells echoing from beneath the ground, though every church in Centralia was demolished years ago. Next, we drive to Detroit, Michigan, to the decaying remains of the Michigan Central Station. Once a crown jewel of the Midwest, its marble floors and grand archways are now cracked and crawling with vines. Broken windows stare like hollow eyes across the city skyline. At night, train horns echo faintly through the air, though no trains have stopped here since 1988. Some believe it's the city itself crying out, unable to let go of what it used to be. Further south, deep in Louisiana, stands Six Flags New Orleans. It was abandoned after Hurricane Katrina in 2005, and time froze inside its rusted gates. Roller coasters stand still against the sky, their tracks twisted and silent. The Ferris wheel looms like a broken clock, stuck at the same hour forever. Locals warn against wandering too close after dark. They say the laughter of children still lingers there, but it's always followed by the sound of rushing water, as if the storm never left. And then there is one final place, hidden in the Appalachian woods, a place most people don't even know exists. An entire village left behind, its homes collapsing into the earth, its streets reclaimed by trees. No record of why the people left, no sign of where they went. Some hikers say they've stumbled upon it by accident, swearing they saw curtains move in windows of houses that should have been empty for 50 years. But there's one question that no one has ever answered: why does this last place still have fresh footprints in the dirt, leading deeper into the woods, even though no one claims to live there? No one follows the footprints for long. They wind between broken porches and sunken barns, then disappear into the tree line like the forest swallows them whole. The silence here is different. It's not the silence of abandonment, it's the silence of watching. Locals call this place Whispering Hollow. They don't write it on maps, but old-timers talk about it over beer at roadside diners, lowering their voices as if the woods might overhear. Some say it was once a mining town that vanished overnight. Others claim it was a government experiment gone wrong. But everyone agrees on one thing: if you hear the whispering, you don't answer back. Visitors describe faint voices drifting through the trees, like families talking around dinner tables, like children playing hide-and-seek. One man swore he heard his mother's voice, though she'd been dead for 20 years. Another claimed he saw smoke rising from a chimney, though when he approached, the house was nothing but ashes. The strangest reports come from those who dare to enter after dark. Flashlights cut through the overgrowth, beams catching shards of broken glass, rusty mailboxes still bearing names that no longer exist. That's when the air changes. Cold, sharp, like stepping into a cellar. The whispers begin, circling, close enough to feel breath on the back of your neck. And sometimes, in the reflection of a window, visitors catch sight of faces that aren't their own. The deeper you walk into Whispering Hollow, the stronger the footprints become. Fresh, wet in the dirt, leading toward the church at the center of the village. The steeple leans sideways, bell long gone, but the doors remain wide open, as if waiting. No one knows who, or what, still walks those paths. And maybe that's the reason the hollow is left to rot. Maybe the people didn't leave at all. Maybe they were taken. Some believe the entire town simply vanished in a single night. Dishes left half-finished on dinner tables, lamps still burning with oil, rocking chairs swaying though no breeze stirred the air. Search parties came and went, but there were no bodies, no luggage, not even a trail of where the people could have gone. Just a village frozen mid-breath, like time itself had cracked. The church at the center holds the darkest pull. Those who've dared to step inside describe the pews splintered and warped, hymn books rotting in place, their pages fused together from damp. And yet, the strangest thing, they all swear they heard the organ playing. Slow, deep notes shaking the hollow air, though the instrument itself is nothing but broken pipes and rust. Some hikers never return from Whispering Hollow. The sheriff's office chalks it up to wild animals, hidden caves, or people simply getting lost. But families of the missing say the same thing, that the last text, the last phone call, always mention one detail. Footsteps. Not their own. At night, the hollow glows faintly, as though lanterns still hang in the windows. Travelers on back roads catch glimpses through the trees, warm light flickering where no one should be living. Some turn their cars around immediately. Others stop, drawn by the impossible warmth. They say once you step past the boundary, once the air changes and the whispers begin, the hollow remembers you. And sooner or later, it calls you back. People who've been called back describe dreams before they vanish. Not nightmares, dreams that feel too real. Sitting at a dinner table with strangers who smile as if they've known you all your life. Walking streets you've never seen, yet knowing every turn by heart. Waking up with the taste of ash on your tongue and dirt under your nails, as if you had been somewhere else all night. One woman from West Virginia claimed she left the hollow years ago but never truly escaped. Every autumn, when the leaves turned red, she would hear knocking at her door after midnight. Always 3 knocks. Always slow. She swore that when she peeked through the window, she saw the church steeple in the distance, rising against the trees, even though she was hundreds of miles away. Some historians tried to dig into records, hoping to find an explanation. Old census logs show a settlement in that area, yes, but the names are strange. Not English. Not German. Not native. Words that don't seem to belong to any language. And then, the records stop entirely, as if the government itself tried to erase them. But stories are harder to bury. Truckers passing through the Appalachians swear they've seen barefoot figures standing on the roadside at night, pale faces watching as headlights sweep past. Some disappear when the brights hit them. Others turn and begin walking toward the woods. And always, there are the footprints. Fresh in the mud, leading back into Whispering Hollow. The question no one has ever answered is simple: who is making them? Some say it's the villagers themselves, still alive in a way that doesn't make sense. Not living, not dead, just waiting, repeating the same endless walk through the hollow. Others whisper it's something older, something that wears the shape of people but isn't human at all. Whatever it is, the footprints never lead out. They always lead deeper. A few paranormal investigators once tried to follow them all the way. They filmed everything, uploading clips online before their feed cut out. In the last video, the camera shook wildly, voices shouting in panic, and then it went silent. Weeks later, hikers stumbled on their gear scattered in the dirt, cameras cracked open like eggshells. The footage was gone, memory cards missing. But the strangest thing wasn't what was lost, it was what they found. New footprints. Small ones, like those of a child, circling the investigators' last campsite. The prints were fresh, pressed into the mud, even though no children had been reported missing in the area. Locals who heard the story just nodded quietly, as if it only confirmed what they already knew. The hollow doesn't take people at random. It chooses. And once it chooses, there's no escaping it. Because sooner or later, no matter how far you run, you'll see those same footprints outside your own home, leading straight to your door. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night and finding mud tracked across your living room floor. The back door still locked. No broken windows. Just prints, small, bare, wet, leading from the hallway to your bedroom. People who've lived through it say they froze, afraid to breathe, afraid to even blink. Because the prints never stop at the doorway. They always stop right beside the bed. One man in Virginia claimed he followed them outside, desperate to prove to himself it was a prank. But when he stepped onto his porch, the trail stretched across his yard and into the road. That's when he noticed something worse. His neighbors were outside too, standing silently, each one pointing toward the woods. When he shouted at them, they didn't move, didn't speak. Just pointed. He packed his bags that night and never came back. Others aren't so lucky. A family in Tennessee vanished after calling the sheriff about strange noises, soft humming coming from their walls. Deputies found the house empty, dinner still warm on the table. Upstairs, the beds were neatly made, except for one. In the master bedroom, the sheets were pulled back, the indentation of two bodies still pressed into the mattress. And there, smeared across the headboard, was mud. The sheriff's report never mentioned the writing. Witnesses who saw it say it looked like letters, but not in English, not in any language they could recognize. Some swore the symbols glowed faintly, pulsing like embers, before fading back into the wood. That's why people say Whispering Hollow isn't just abandoned, it's still alive. Watching. Waiting. Choosing. And every year, more footprints appear where no one should be walking. Hikers see them first, scattered along forgotten trails, pressed into soft earth that hasn't felt a shoe in decades. Always barefoot. Always too fresh to be old. Some lead in circles, some vanish mid-step, but others head straight toward towns. Last winter, a hunter near Asheville swore he found a set of prints leading out of the hollow. He followed them in the snow, thinking maybe he'd track down whoever was trespassing on his land. For nearly 2 miles he trailed them, through the trees, across a frozen creek, until they ended at the edge of his own yard. He never spoke about what he saw on the porch, only that he moved out within a week and left the house to rot. Stories spread quietly, passed over late-night radio, whispered at truck stops and diners. Families in Kentucky and West Virginia waking to see strangers standing motionless at the edge of their property. Pale, silent, watching. By the time anyone steps outside to confront them, they're gone. Only the prints remain, pressed into gravel, fading toward the treeline. Folklore experts dig deeper, trying to match the symbols carved in the hollow's church to old languages, to runes, to anything. None fit. The closest resemblance comes from markings found in caves thousands of years old, long before anyone built towns in Appalachia. Symbols that weren't warnings. They were invitations. And lately, more and more people are hearing the whispers. Not just in the woods, on highways, in their homes, even through their phones. A voice low and steady, calling their name, just beneath the crackle of static. Always the same message, repeated like a promise. Come back. Those who hear it say it never stops. At first it's faint, like the rustle of leaves on a calm night. But as days pass, it grows sharper, closer, threading itself into every sound, the hum of a refrigerator, the static on a radio, the hiss of pipes in the walls. People try to ignore it, but the voice is patient. It waits. One man in Ohio unplugged every device in his house, cut the power, even tore the batteries out of his smoke alarms. Still, in the silence of his darkened kitchen, he heard his name whispered right behind his ear. Some resist. Some give in. Neighbors tell of a woman who walked barefoot down the center of Main Street at 3 in the morning, eyes wide open but unfocused, like she was sleepwalking. She didn't respond to anyone, didn't look left or right. She just walked toward the tree line at the edge of town, vanishing into the dark. Search parties never found her, but days later, hikers discovered her footprints deep in Whispering Hollow. Those prints didn't wander or circle like the others. They went straight to the church doors. And when investigators checked the abandoned building, they found something chilling. The dust inside had been disturbed, dragged into long, sweeping lines across the floor. Not random, not accidental, shapes. The same glowing symbols once etched into the headboard in Tennessee. Only now, they formed a circle. Inside that circle were more footprints. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Some small. Some large. Pressed over one another until the ground seemed alive with them. As if everyone who vanished had gathered there. Witnesses who peeked through the broken windows of that church swore they saw movement inside, even though no one was there. Shadows pacing, pausing, then pacing again. Some claimed the pews shook, wood groaning like something heavy sat down all at once. Others said they heard the organ, notes deep and dragging, playing by itself, every sound vibrating through their bones. The sheriff boarded up the doors, nailed planks across the windows, and posted warning signs around the hollow. But the warnings never last. Within days the boards are torn loose, the nails scattered in the dirt. The church never stays closed. It's as if something inside refuses to be sealed away. What unsettles people most is how the circle of symbols keeps growing. Each time someone dares to sneak inside, it's larger. Wider. As though it's spreading outward, swallowing more of the floor. One hiker swore he saw faint lines etched into the earth outside, stretching down the steps and into the grass. Almost like the church itself is bleeding symbols into the land. And then came the night the bells rang. No bell hangs in that tower, hasn't for decades, but a farmer 2 miles out woke to the sound of deep tolling, shaking his windows. Others in nearby towns heard it too, heavy and deliberate, echoing across the valleys. It rang 12 times, then silence. The next morning, the fresh footprints doubled. Not just one set, not just two. Dozens, all leading toward Whispering Hollow. Some barefoot. Some in shoes. Some so small they looked like they belonged to children who could barely walk. That was when the disappearances began to spread beyond the hollow. In nearby towns, families would wake to find one member gone. A back door unlocked. Shoes left behind. No sign of struggle, just vanished in the night. In every case, muddy footprints were found trailing from the house, always leading toward the trees. One boy in Kentucky went missing from his bedroom, his parents frantic when they found the window wide open. Police dogs tracked his scent for miles before it ended abruptly in the middle of an abandoned road. No car tracks. No blood. Just a single line of barefoot prints pressed into the dust, pointing east toward the hollow. Locals started burning lanterns on their porches at night, hoping light would ward it off. But soon, people noticed the lanterns flickering strangely, swaying as if someone passed too close. And sometimes, when they opened the door to check, they swore they saw faces staring from the tree line, pale, motionless, eyes too wide. A trucker passing through at dawn told of figures walking the shoulder of the highway. Dozens of them. Silent, barefoot, all headed in the same direction. He leaned on his horn, but not a single head turned. They just kept walking until they slipped one by one into the woods. By summer, the sheriff stopped answering calls about the hollow altogether. Folks said his cruiser was found abandoned on the roadside, driver's door open, engine still running. His footprints trailed away from it, bare against the dirt, heading straight into the fog. And that night, for the first time, the whispers weren't confined to the trees. People all across the valley heard them, seeping through their walls, riding on the air like a song. Not one voice, but hundreds. Calling names. At first, people tried to ignore it, telling themselves it was the wind, or neighbors playing a cruel trick. But the whispers grew sharper, clearer, until there was no mistaking it. They weren't just calling random names. They were calling the names of the living. Parents swore they heard their children being called from outside at night. Husbands heard their wives. Some even heard their own voices, echoing back at them from the dark, beckoning to step beyond the porch light. Those who resisted spoke of doors rattling, windows fogging from the outside, as if something was breathing against the glass. One man in Virginia, desperate to prove it wasn't real, recorded the sound on his phone. He uploaded it online before disappearing. The clip was only 30 seconds long, but you can hear it, layered voices, hundreds of them, all repeating the same name. His name. At the very end of the recording, right before it cuts off, there's a faint reply. A single word. Coming. By then, entire neighborhoods were emptying out. People fled, leaving houses locked but lights still burning, cars in driveways, food rotting on stoves. The closer you got to the hollow, the faster the abandonment spread, like a ripple pushing outward. But running doesn't always help. Reports began surfacing from as far away as Ohio, Tennessee, even Georgia, fresh footprints appearing on porches, in basements, on stairways leading up to bedrooms. Some were muddy, others ash gray, like soot pressed into the carpet. And then came the photographs. Blurry shots from security cameras, snapped in the dead of night. Figures standing just beyond the range of the light. Dozens of them. Sometimes hundreds. All facing the house. Waiting. But none of them led back out. As if they were waiting for something to arrive. The photographs spread online like wildfire. Some dismissed them as hoaxes, clever edits meant to scare. But those who lived in the valley knew better. They recognized the faces in the grainy images. Neighbors. Relatives. People who had gone missing months, even years before. Only, something was wrong with them. The eyes were too dark, too deep, as though the sockets were hollow. Their mouths hung slightly open, but no teeth showed, no breath clouded the air. Just silent stares, captured in frame after frame, all turned toward the lens as if they knew they were being watched. A family in West Virginia fled their home after their motion lights clicked on night after night. Each time, more figures appeared. At first 3, then 8, then nearly 30. Always at the edge of the yard. Always closer than the night before. When the police checked, they found only prints. So many that the grass itself had flattened, pressed into the soil as if hundreds had been standing there for hours. The family never returned. Soon after, power grids began to fail across the counties nearest the hollow. Whole towns blacked out, swallowed by night. And in that darkness, people swore they saw lanterns swaying in the trees. Faint yellow glows, dozens of them, flickering like a ghost parade moving silently through the forest. Those who stayed behind learned something unsettling. The voices weren't confined to whispers anymore. Radios picked them up on dead stations. Baby monitors clicked alive with murmurs in the middle of the night. Even phone calls carried fragments of the sound, breathless, urgent, repeating the same promise. Almost here. After that, everything began to unravel. In towns bordering the hollow, pets went missing first. Dogs that once barked at the treeline grew silent before vanishing altogether, their leashes found snapped, collars left behind. Cats disappeared from porches, leaving muddy paw prints trailing toward the woods. Farmers awoke to find barns wide open, livestock gone without a trace, hooves and prints pressed deep into the mud, yet no tracks leading back out. And then the people began to walk. Neighbors watched in horror as families they'd known for years rose from their beds in the middle of the night and filed wordlessly into the streets. Barefoot, dressed in pajamas, some still clutching blankets or toys. They moved in lines, quiet, their eyes fixed on the forest beyond town. Anyone who tried to stop them swore their bodies grew ice cold, their voices unshakable as they repeated the same words in unison. It's time. Within hours, whole blocks stood empty. Houses still lit, televisions still humming, doors wide open. The only sound was the distant tolling of a bell that had not existed for decades. Those brave enough to follow the processions claimed the march always ended the same way. The missing didn't scatter once they entered the woods. They gathered. Dozens, sometimes hundreds, all moving toward the hollow. Toward the church. And witnesses swear, every time a new group arrived, the organ began to play. No one has ever seen who sits at the keys. But the sound grows louder with each disappearance, swelling through the valleys, heavy enough to rattle windows miles away. Some believe the music is a warning. Others believe it's a summons. The closer the sound gets, the harder it is to ignore. At first it was only faint, something you might mistake for thunder rolling through the mountains. But soon, the organ's low, dragging notes began to seep into everyday life. Workers and diners froze as silverware trembled against plates. Students in classrooms went silent as chalk dust vibrated from the boards. Even underground, in basements and storm shelters, people swore they could feel it, like the earth itself was humming beneath their feet. Reporters tried to capture the phenomenon, setting up cameras and microphones along the backroads. Most recordings failed, filled with static or sudden bursts of shrieking feedback. But one clip survived, taken just outside Whispering Hollow. The sound of the organ rises, slow and steady, and then, layered underneath, it isn't just music. It's voices. Hundreds, maybe thousands, singing in unison. A hymn no one recognizes, in a language no one can translate. The video spread online before it was abruptly taken down. No explanation. No trace. Only fragments re-uploaded by strangers, shaky and distorted. And then, something changed. The prints, once scattered and random, began forming patterns across the ground. Circles. Spirals. Long lines that stretched like veins across entire fields. Farmers woke to find their crops flattened in designs too perfect to be natural, each one pointing east, always east, toward the hollow. And the lanterns were no longer confined to the trees. People began seeing them on rooftops, on bridges, hovering above highways at night. Dozens of dim yellow lights swaying in perfect unison, always moving in the same direction. Heading toward the towns that were still left. At first, people thought they were tricks of the eye, swamp gas, drones, headlights bouncing strangely off the fog. But the lanterns didn't behave like light should. They pulsed, breathing in rhythm, dimming and brightening as though alive. And when they passed overhead, every sound died. No crickets. No wind. Not even the hum of power lines. Just silence, heavy and suffocating, pressing down until the last glow slipped past. Soon, entire towns began to barricade themselves indoors after sunset. Windows boarded. Streets empty. Yet even then, the lanterns would drift slowly between the houses, floating low enough to scrape rooftops, brushing against chimneys, leaving behind the smell of ash and damp earth. Children whispered of faces inside the light, pale, shifting shapes that blinked and watched as they passed. And always, in the morning, new footprints appeared. One night, a family in North Carolina filmed the lights from their upstairs window. The footage showed a dozen lanterns hovering just above the yard. Then, without warning, every bulb in the house exploded at once, showering sparks, plunging the rooms into darkness. The camera caught only one last image before it cut out, figures standing in the glow, side by side, staring straight up at the window. By now, the organ could be heard clear across the state lines. Low, relentless, like a storm that never moves on. Churches tried drowning it out with their own bells, but every time they rang, the hollow's tolling grew louder, swallowing the sound whole. And then, in the middle of July, it happened for the first time. The lanterns didn't just pass through. They stopped. Dozens of them, hovering over an entire town square. Waiting. The town of Briar Creek had barely 300 people left, most of them too stubborn or too scared to leave their homes. That night, they gathered at their windows and porches, staring up at the lights that hung over Main Street like a ceiling of glowing eyes. For nearly an hour, nothing happened. The lanterns swayed gently, as if caught in some wind no one could feel. The air grew heavy, pressing against lungs, against hearts, until even children fell silent. Dogs whimpered but didn't bark. Clocks ticked slower. It was as though time itself was straining under the weight of what was about to come. Then, the first note of the organ hit. It was deeper than thunder, vibrating through the ground, rattling glass in the windows. Another note followed, then another, until the hymn began again, the same ancient, impossible song heard in the hollow. Only this time, it wasn't faint or distant. It was deafening. People covered their ears, but it didn't help. The music was inside them, echoing in their bones, forcing breath into their throats until some began to hum along against their will. One by one, voices joined the hymn. Men, women, children, eyes glazed, mouths moving in perfect unison. And then they stepped outside. Doors open in every block. Bare feet pressed into the dirt. Dozens of townsfolk walked slowly toward the square, faces blank, humming louder, drawn beneath the hovering lights. No one resisted. Not one. Those who tried to stop them couldn't move. Some collapsed, clutching their chests, gasping as if their ribs were being crushed by invisible hands. Others screamed, but their voices were drowned out by the swelling hymn. And when the lanterns finally lowered, drifting close enough to touch the ground, the people walked straight into them. The light swallowed them whole. And when the lanterns rose again, the square was empty. By dawn, Briar Creek was a ghost town. Cars still sat at gas pumps, engines cooled but keys dangling in ignitions. Plates of food lay half-eaten on tables inside the diner. Sprinklers hissed on lawns with no one to turn them off. The only thing missing was the people. Every last one of them had vanished. Reporters arrived within hours, but their cameras captured nothing unusual. No lights. No music. Just silence broken by the wind. Still, they described the air as charged, like walking into a room just after lightning has struck. Birds refused to land. Dogs in neighboring counties howled until their voices cracked. Authorities tried to cordon off the town, but that didn't stop the stories. Travelers on the interstate swore they saw lanterns drifting above the rooftops at night, forming slow, deliberate circles over the church steeple. Others claimed they heard the hymn carried miles on the wind, a low chant that rattled glass and set babies screaming in their cribs. Then came the broadcasts. One evening, televisions across 3 states flickered to static. Radios cut from commercials mid-sentence. For exactly 42 seconds, every device played the same thing, the sound of the organ, followed by voices chanting in that same impossible language. But this time, threaded between the words, was English. A message. We are almost finished. After that, the disappearances escalated. Whole schools emptied during the day, teachers and students alike stepping outside and never coming back. Hospitals found beds abandoned, IVs dripping into the floor. Highways filled with driverless cars, engines idling while doors hung wide open. And always, the prints appeared. Barefoot, wet, circling the empty places like signatures left behind. Circles that grew larger. Circles that seemed to be closing in. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the lanterns stopped appearing. Nights grew quiet again. The organ's low hum faded from the valleys. Radios returned to static, televisions to noise. For the first time in months, there was silence, not the heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against your chest, but the ordinary kind, filled with wind and crickets and the hum of life. But the people never came back. Towns remained empty, their streets cracked and overgrown. Playgrounds rusted under the sun, diners sat with coffee cups still waiting to be filled. Whole neighborhoods stood frozen in time, like photographs abandoned in old frames. Researchers combed through them, finding no trace of struggle. Just footprints. Always footprints. Leading into the woods, into the hollow, into a place no one dared follow anymore. The story of Whispering Hollow spread far beyond Appalachia. Some called it a government cover-up, others a mass hysteria, others something older that had finally awakened. But those who lived nearest to it knew the truth, whatever it was had not ended. It had simply moved on. And every so often, in towns far from the mountains, a child will wake their parents in the dead of night, saying they hear someone calling their name. Soft. Patient. Familiar. The parents always hush them back to sleep. But in the morning, they sometimes find the floor by the bed covered in mud. Fresh footprints. Pointing toward the door.